based on a Maimon and Hasidic discourse in Torah Eir from the Alter Rebbe, that taking consideration that the neshamas in Mitzrayim were general neshamas klolius, and each one had more this task, and therefore they were able to accomplish more, cover more ground. On the other hand, when it comes to the later generations, it's a schleppenish. They're coping with the 86, which is Pevov.
The Rebbe also was saying the Sikha that already the Avodas Adorim is over.
Right, and that's what the Rebbe said in Tavshin Nun Aleph and Beis, that Avodas Adorim is already over. That already we accomplished, we finished that stage, and now it's in preparing for the Gula. So now we go on further. That b'meila in the Aveda of correcting and restoring Eila Mateo, there are two levels. Yesh bazeh beishlav in two steps. B'tchila hi Aveda rak beifen shel iskafia levad. First is an inyan of iskafia. Iskafia means it is only subduing the negative feeling and impression and effect. V'achakach gam Aveda dishapche. The Aveda dishapche is that not only that he subdues, which is temporary and not complete, but he also converts it. Shemahapach gamas hara letev, that he also converts the evil to good. Shezeu inyan sheishlite beyitzrei Aveda dishapche, that he put him in control of his evil incarnation, which means the Aveda dishapche, that he completely converted him. Which this is also what we see in davening. It says umatzasas levavei nemen lefanecha, that umatzasas levavei, that his heart, that says his heart, sai is good inclination, side evil, everything was converted. Levavoi with two bases. It's mentioned. So this is basically this is also the connection with what is discussed in Kabbalistic terms in that Maimer in the Hasidic discourse 100 years earlier, although it doesn't have a direct connection to the concept of the pasuk of the verse that Hashem blessed Avraham, Abraham vagam shahem shechul lecheire inyan b'fnei atzmei. Although the hemshech, the sequence, the series of the Hasidic discourses from 100 years earlier, and the topics that are discussed is a topic for itself. It goes from one maimer, from one Hasidic discourse to the next one, not related directly and in an obvious way to the verse with which that Hasidic discourse begins, and the beginning and the end and conclusion of every maimer is the inya for itself. It concentrates on the end, answers the questions of the beginning, but in the middle, in order to be able to understand that he introduces a completely new, deep concept, which he discusses and elaborates on it, and then sometimes may continue in the next Hasidic discourse. And as it is known that the MaMarim that the Rabbeim would write, the Hasidic discourses, the format, how they would write it, that in the beginning what they would do is they would write it. This is one of the ways they would write, especially the Rebbe Rashab, and it does come up from time to time. The Rebbe Rashab would sometimes write one chunk. It can go on for pages and pages, a whole concepts of Hasidus, that he wrote it from pages and pages. But later, as he is going to be saying it in public, he will break it down into chapters. He'll break it down into MaMarim, discourses which has a beginning and an end, and that's how it's developed into MaMarim. And he'll add questions. He'll answer the questions by the end of the Hasidic discourse. In all of these discourses, which is in the series of these, which is all in this series. Besides the first Maimer, that he will not answer the questions till the end of the whole series, which could sometimes be a year later and sometimes years later. That's the style of a Hemshech. So therefore the Rebbe says, so that even the contents of the middle of the Maimer does not necessarily refer to the beginning of the Maimer, to the topic with which the Maimer opens up, with which the Hasidic discourse opens, because this was written already in advance. Later, the Rebbe Rashab decided he is going to break here, and he is going to make a few chapters, and he's going to develop it in a Hasidic discourse a separate Hasidic discourse, and he will add a verse in the beginning with questions, and by the end they'll answer the questions.
They were almost incidental to the MaMaar itself.
Coincident? Incidental. Yeah,
the questions and answers almost secondary to the MaMaar.
Right. It's the topic that is going on. And that's why we see also that in the Hemshech Ayin Beis, the Hemshech that he said in 1912, and he continued until late 1915, he doesn't actually stop over there, but he continues writing later, but he doesn't break it down into chapters, because he didn't plan to continue. So there's a whole volume, a third volume, that is called Chelik Shalei Nehemar, a section that was never said. And that really, if you don't have a page marker, you would not know where you're up to, unless you remember a page number. Because it's mamish, it's no beginning, no end. It's a run-on, 150 pages, I think it is. Very deep concepts of Chassidus, as it will be in the redemption time, darkness into light. But this is what it is. So therefore, the Rebbe says, since we see that the format, this is one format, how the Rabbeim would say a hemshech, a series of Maimorim. There's also another format. The other format is the other way, and the Rebbe Rashab sometimes used that also. And that is, he said the Maimorim separately, the discourses. Later, when he wrote them, he made them all into one. An example for that is Kuntras Amayan. Kuntras Amayan, the Rebbe Rashab said for 7 weeks. In summer, Tafrei Samach Gimel, he began saying it on Yud Beis Tammuz, Friedrich Rebbe's birthday, 23rd birthday. And he said it for 7 Shabbosim or weeks, and finished at Parsha Eikev, if I'm not mistaken. Later, the Rebbe Rashab took a walk, a stroll with his son, with the previous Rebbe, and after the walk, he said, now we can release it already. So the Rebbe Rashab wrote it all up as one, and today, what we see, some section that's called Maimer or Peirik, is not the original way he said that Maimer. It was just, it's all put together, it should be easier to learn. And it is actually recommended, highly recommended by the previous Rebbe and by the Rebbe, the people that begin the study of Chassidus, that do not have a great background of Chassidus, they should start with Kuntras Amayan. So Kuntras Amayan is one of the first things for beginners.
Mesivta, if they teach it the first
In Mesivta, they teach that the first thing, right. That's when the first, that's right after Tanya, they teach Kuntras Amayan. Kuntras Amayan has a whole background. There's a reason why he said that Hemshech. He said that Hemshech because he was very bothered by what was happening then in these different cities, because of the Haskalah movement, that they tried to pull away people from religious life. The shuls became emptier. It wasn't like people going to shul between Mincha and Ma'ariv and learned. The whole fear of Hashem, of the Almighty, and the yoke of taking upon myself, Teiro Mitzvahs, everything started to slack off. Young guys were already starting to slip and wander, and the Rebbe Rashab saw that he has to draw the line and actually urge people to keep their eyes open, because it's a situation that youth can get lost. And the Rebbe Rashab discusses all these issues, discusses parnasa, discusses pleasures, discusses other things that a person is tempted to go for, and shows that this is not beneficial for a person, not in a physical sense, not in a spiritual sense. So it's a whole hemshech. Derech Agav, I remember once in yeshiva when we wrote an article about Kuntras Amayan, the background of Kuntras Amayan, that Bacharim should know when, what is Kuntras Amayan about? Why was it said? As a hemshech and then published. Rav Shmuel Sefer was the one that actually wrote it. He wrote it up and then they typed it from there. And the first time it was published was here in the United States in Tafshin Gimel, 1943. And when the Rebbe prepared it for print, he asked the previous Rebbe if the previous Rebbe could write an introduction, intro, preface discussing what is this about. So the Friedrich Rebbe wrote, half of the book is Friedrich Rebbe's diary, what took place then, with the different factions that were elements that were going on, different things. There's a lot of material there. So there was an article written, a shir prepared for the yeshiva, that they should know what is the Kuntras Amayan about. It was later handed into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe generally would take a lot of mail, letters. When the Rebbe would travel to the Eil, he would take the letters to the Eil, And the Rebbe would answer questions. The Rebbe would answer letters by the Eil.